Hi, this is Mike making my video to add to my collection. Today's 4/30/2025 and it's 1:27 a.m. So anyway, yeah, I'm talking about shedding off the old self, shaking off the old self, becoming a new man, putting on the new garment. Um, basically I discovered through many years of trial and tribulation that there's two ways to look at it. You could have the egoic self, and of course basically the subconscious self. Uh, basically two selves, two parts of your being. The male energies and the female energies. It's about being and doing. Rest and motion. So anyway, basically what that is your ego basically uh, is is a higher form of energy. It's a higher vibrational state. You raise your vibrations. Sometimes your ego, basically can really get you to achieve a lot of stuff. There's no doubt about it. But on the other hand, that would be like the doing aspect, but the being aspect, you know, uh, sometimes that state of being is more peaceful. And, you know, when you have the ego, what the ego does is it does its work, and then, it steps down. And then, of course, the slave, that's the master, steps down, and then the slave takes over. And that's more of a peaceful, creative side. And between the two of them, they work it out together, and that's when you can move mountains. But when you shut off your old self, you annihilate the ego. What you're doing is you're going through a phase, the dark night of the soul, basically. And that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. It means that your manifestations are coming. And, basically, when you put that to rest, uh, the ego to rest, you're shaking off your ego and your old self. You're destroying that old man. And the old man, basically steps down. And of course, the conscious agent, the subconscious mind takes over. And it's more of a peaceful state of being. It's peaceful. The yoke is light. Uh, and of course, the lordship is gentle. And you have that state of being kick in. And usually, when you're in a state of being, you're in a state of rest. That's what they mean by deep rest. Deep rest. And it's, a lot of times it has to do with being bored, but that's not necessarily such a bad thing. It's quite the opposite from the waking state that you have, that you're always trying to achieve everything. You want to be the head, and sometimes when you let go, you become the tail, and you don't necessarily lead the pack. You're not the alpha male anymore. You become the subordinate in a lot of ways, but being the alpha male isn't all it's cracked up to be. And you have stress, and you're always trying to take on challenges that you can achieve. But the thing is it's not really helpful to be that way all the time. So anyway, what it is, you go through this phase, and you're shaking off your old self, and it happens. Sometimes it takes several years, to do this. But when you do it, you get to the point where your life is set up. Your ego has basically set up your life in such a way that you no longer have to struggle. You did the work, you paid your taxes, you're living, on a probably, less income, but the thing is you don't have to struggle as much, and your life is easier. I wanted time and money, and of course, freedom comes with time. So basically, I ended up getting that. So have that. And of course, Maslow, in his hierarchy of needs, I'm at the point now where I don't have to struggle. I'm not at the bottom. I'm actually at a point in time where the struggle is over and the battle is over, and I'm just at a state of peace. I live a simpler life. When you take away from a man's desires, you add to his wealth. You don't have to give somebody money necessarily or more property. You take away from his desires and you add to his wealth. And that's, a lot of times that's what happens when you find that pearl or that treasure that's buried in a field. Your hair, the field, your mind, the pineal gland. The windows of heaven open up and I give you a blessing so big you can't contain it. And you can't wrap your mind around it. The thing is you come to a place of rest, and that might, it's like you think about contentment, and that's actually being enlightened. It's a permanent state of being, and it can be done to where you live happily ever after, and it's a permanent state. It's being content. And when you're content with things, it's more or less saying that you're happy with what you got, and you're taking away from all your desires, and that increases your wealth. There's spiritual wealth, mental wealth, physical wealth. You simplify your life, and you're not spending as much money, and you're definitely not. You take away from the desire of women, and of course wine, alcohol, and drugs, and useless knowledge, or even knowledge in general. Sometimes you find that it doesn't have to be where you need to know everything. Knowledge is subjective to change. It's an evolving thing, much like the human language. And one thing can mean like 6 different things. So it's okay to know some things, but you add one thing on top of another, but you get more ideas and more theories. But your mind is always crunching numbers. But sometimes you simplify it, where you don't have as many desires. That's what happens when you go through this change. Is a lot of your desires you no longer desire anymore. You don't have that urge, to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and tackle the world. It's like I've already done that, and I already conquered the world, and I don't necessarily need to do it again and again and again. So, a lot of times these desires don't keep revisiting me. If you have a desire in your head, and sometimes all you got to do is just acknowledge it, observe it, and then it eventually passes away like a cloud. And then you just keep doing that, but then eventually these clouds pass by and you have a clear sky. So you have a clear, concise operating system, and a lot of your desires have been met, so you don't feel depression necessarily, but you feel content. And being content, it's not like euphoria, it's not like bliss, expansiveness. I've already done all that, so then now it's basically got to the point where I'm content. And being content is kind of just above being bored, but it's like, I find things to keep me busy. My hobbies are a lot less expensive than some other people. I talked to this one guy, and he had a horse, or he had horse says, and I told him, I said, that's a very expensive hobby. And he got kind of angry at me, but the thing is you think about it, you cut your hobbies down, you cut your spending down, and you find little things that keep. Sometimes it's something small that you need to do, or something small that you find to fill in those empty spots, and it's a hell of a lot more, a hell of a lot less expensive, and you just do simple things. So anyway, you become frugal, you're modest in every single sense of the word. Rational, resourceful, logical, realistic, and rational. So you do that, and then of course you don't chase after things like going to college. You don't have a big house, a big car, or a bunch of cars. You don't have hobbies that are expensive. And then the hedonistic treadmill, you have it where you simplify everything. You don't have a pet. Uh, and of course, you don't have a bunch of subscriptions to things. And you just kind of, you don't have this big sprawling house with a bunch of expensive furniture. You don't spend $1,000 on a bed, or $1,200 on a phone, and you try to, you eat food out of a can, you smoke cigarettes out of a bag, and, you're just basically frugal. You buy things used, and you buy used clothing. And, it's like I'm going to be working out at the gym, but not yet. And eventually, I'm just doing it to keep my health. But, you just do all that, and then you basically take away from things that are going to keep draining your account. And, of course, you simplify things. Eventually you get to the point where you have less merchandise and you live kind of like a hermit. And, they say if you live by yourself, you don't have a girlfriend or a wife. I mean, once you get divorced, you're not supposed to get married again. And Jesus said that in the New Kingdom. He said that's basically what we do, is we're servants of each other. You don't get married. So there's that. And then you don't chase after women. You have enough of it, where you don't desire it anymore. And if, I'm not saying it's bad to have kids, but sometimes for some people it's not meant for them. And, so anyway, there's that, and, of course, you shouldn't have a young girlfriend if you got, you don't want to screw her life up, and basically she can have kids with somebody else, it's like, there's no point in it. So anyway, there's that, and then, I was going to say something else, I can't remember now, but, you just, get to the point when you cut off all that fat and you don't have all those problems nagging at you, you're not up to your eyeballs in debt with a big house, expensive car, European sports car, or whatever. That's not going to really add a cubit to your height or your lifespan, so you really don't need it. And, in other words, you don't need to have your ego take over. Sometimes you need your ego to take a break and just be, and just accept things for what they are. Don't try to force things. Don't try to, don't have attachments to all these things. If you don't have attachments and you don't have expectations that are high, you can be satisfied with smaller things. And that's really the way society should be, frugal. And that's just the way it is. And, people that spend all this money and stuff, and it's just pointless. And, you shouldn't. I don't date people, women. I don't date women. They're too expensive. And a lot of these women have high body counts and stuff like that, so I'm not interested. And, it says, why be equally yoked with a harlot? There's no point in it. And then you got to figure, well, there's just no point. You're wasting your life. It's called the wide gate. And then, of course, the narrow gate. That's the one you want. And, but if you're not going to have kids, there's no point in chasing after the narrow gate either. So anyway, that's how that works. And so, yeah, you just take pleasure in things. Take showers when you need to. You go for a walk if you want to. You go for a little drive or whatever. But I don't drive very much, and I just have, I'm a lot more frugal. So anyway, that's all I really have to say. Over and out.